This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Myra the Magnificent EDH deck. Thank you once again for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Today we are updating and upgrading our Myra the Magnificent EDH deck. We've got 3 spells going in that we want to target with Myra's activated ability, which means that 3 spells are coming out. If you are familiar with this Myra the Magnificent deck, then you know what we're trying to do. If you're not, then you can look in the description below for this build's deck tech, for this build's up to the moment deck list, and this build's video primer series. Let's begin with the first new card going into the 99 here, and it is Prisoner's Dilemma. Here we have a sorcery for 3 and 2 red mana. Each opponent secretly chooses Silence or Snitch. Then the choices are revealed. If each opponent chooses Silence, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 4 damage to each of them. So if all of our opponents decide to choose Silence, they're each going to take 4 points of damage. Note that it says secretly, so there really shouldn't be any convoluting going on, but we know how the commander table can be, so make sure your eyes are peeled. Prisoner's Dilemma will deal 4 damage to each opponent that chooses Silence if they all choose Silence. If each opponent chose Snitch, then Prisoner's Dilemma will deal 8 damage to each of them. So if everyone's on board with Silence, it's 4 points of damage. If everyone's on board with Snitch, it's 8 points of damage. If there isn't, then it's 12 points of damage to each opponent who chose Silence. This is going to make for a lot of randomness, and the more players, of course, that are sitting at the EDH table, the better off this spell is going to be. 1v1, this is probably not optimal in a Myra build, but if you know you're going to have many opponents at the table, 4, 5, maybe even more, Prisoner's Dilemma is going to help to precipitously tick the opponent's life totals down to 0 very, very quickly. And with a mana value of only 5, it's not too hard to exile it with Myra's ability. So with Prisoner's Dilemma going in, a card coming out similar to its direct damage ability is coming out, which means Explosion of Riches is on its way out. Now here we have a sorcery for 5 and 1 red mana, so we are saving a little bit of overall mana with Prisoner's Dilemma versus Explosion of Riches. Here we drew a card, and then each other player may draw a card. And whenever a card is drawn this way, Explosion of Riches deals 5 damage to target opponent chosen at random from among our opponents. This became too easy to just dodge depending on what point of the game it is. Early on, our opponents are gladly to exchange, at least in my experiences. They've been glad to exchange randomly assigned damage to get cards into their hand. In the late game, however, there is no damage being dealt, so all we really invested is just 6 mana into Myra to exile this card from our graveyard, just to draw a card. That is not going to do it. We want to make sure that each time we're opening our attractions, we're getting cards that we really want to get onto our side of the battlefield with Myra's ability, so that when we visit our attractions, they can trigger and cast those spells without us having to pay their mana costs. And what we're looking at right now, Prisoner's Dilemma is going to help us more than Explosion of Riches, because its ability is a lot better in the early and mid game, where this is not. All right, so here we go. We are going to move on to card number 2 that's going in, and that's going to be Impending Flux. Here we have another sorcery. This one's for 2 and 1 red mana, and Impending Flux deals X damage to each opponent and each creature they control, where X is a 1 plus the number of spells we've cast from anywhere other than our hand this turn. It also has Foretell, but we're not looking to get this foretold, although we could by paying 1 and 2 red and then 2. By paying 2 and then 1 and 2 red to foretell cast it. What we really want to do is to get this onto one of our attractions, and when we manipulate our dice rolls to visit all of the attractions we can possibly visit on our turn, we are able to stack all of our triggers accordingly to have Impending Flux be the last spell cast Remember, it's spells cast from anywhere other than our hand. So the copies generated by our attractions are going to count for Impending Flux. If we have 5 total attractions out there, and we've already cast our other 4 spells, we cast Impending Flux last. We're going to deal 5 plus 1, which is 6 damage to each opponent and each creature. And note that Impending Flux only costs 2 and 1 red mana, and jamming 3 mana into Myra to activate her ability, well, that's going to be easier than Sunday morning in this build. Impending Flux has the potential to be one of the very best removal spells and direct damage dealing spells in this build, as long as the deck is working like it should with our multiple attractions. Impending Flux is going in, and it is going to replace Volcanic Torrent. Note the mana saving here. We got a mana spell. We have a spell with a mana value of 3, replacing a spell with a mana value of 5. And here we cascade, and then Volcanic Torrent deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker our opponent's control, where X is the number of spells we've cast this turn. So here, we're pretty much changing the number of spells that we cast, because in effect we could get more out of X with Volcanic Torrent than we could with Impending Flux, because with all of the spells cast by our attractions, Volcanic Torrent allows us to count up the spells that we've cast from our hand. However, let me try this again. However, what we're overlooking is that Impending Flux will deal direct damage to our opponents, where Volcanic Torrent will only deal direct damage to the planeswalkers. Both of our opponent's creatures are going to be affected by both of these spells, but instead of the planeswalkers being damaged by Volcanic Torrent, Impending Flux is going to deal that damage directly to our opponents. So and also with the mana savings of 3 versus 5, it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to test out and see if it was the right choice to make. We are going to lose the Cascade on Volcanic Torrent, which actually would go to help increasing the damage as well. But again, we're looking for damage to creatures and opponents on the same spell so that we can get the biggest bang for each attraction we visit during our turn. We're going to see, and if not, well, then we'll come back to the Up and Up series. All right, the third and final card going into Myra today, that is going to be Ensnared by the Myra. Another sorcery. This one's for 2 and 2 red mana. Each opponent faces a villainous choice. They exile cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card, and then we may cast that card without paying its mana cost, or that player exiles the top 4 cards of their library, and Ensnared by the Myra deals damage equal to the total mana value of those exile cards to that player. Here with this spell, we're either gaining card advantage or we're dealing direct damage. Either way, it's going to make our game easier by advancing our board states or lowering our opponent's life totals. So with Ensnared by the Myra going in, it is going to replace, Myra. It's going to replace Fiery Confluence. This was a sorcery equal mana value right down to the 2 generic and 2 red. It is a modal spell. We get to choose 3, and we may choose the same mode more than once. Either Fiery Confluence deals 1 damage to each creature, and or it deals 2 damage to each opponent, and or we destroy target artifact. Here what we're looking to do is, if we were to triple up on the direct damage dealing spells, we're investing 4 mana to deal 3 damage to each creature. We can and have demonstrated that we can do better than that. We're investing 4 mana to deal 6 damage to each opponent. Actually, we've shown that we can do better than that as well, and the artifact removal is not really much up for discussion. Here, with Ensnared by the Myra, we're replacing Fiery Confluence with a card that gives us either card advantage or direct damage right to our opponents, instead of trying to deal just the 3 damage to our creatures, the 6 damage to our opponents, or to destroy a target artifact times 3. I think that move will save us in the long run, and the next time we come, we'll find out, baby. We're going to test it out, and if Myra needs to come back, then we will. MTGBC, you let me know about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, a channel for all things magic.